goddamn, I need IPA.
This is Beering Ain't Easy, your podcast for beer humor, dad humor, and beer tastings from Texas and beyond. So crack one if you got one and turn it up.
Welcome to Beering Ain't Easy, Season 2, Episode 27, with Ryan and Drew.
All right, so first order of business today is I want to thank all the remaining few listeners that have come back to us after listening to Ryan and I's terrible hot takes from last episode. So thank you, loyal listeners.
So we put this out, we record these episodes and we put them out into the internets, and we don't really hear that much about it. So, sometimes you got to wonder, does anybody really listen? And then you do the hot takes episode and we say some of the things we said. And I'd have to say, apparently people do listen. What do you think, Drew?
All press is good press, right, man?
Apparently. So I have to say, I was a little late for recording tonight. So thank you, Drew, for being patient. The reason why I was a little bit more late than I expected was I stopped at our local gas station on the way home, and I was trying to pick up a particular beer that was kind of the crux of the entire last episode. And this gas station did not have the beer I was looking for. That was going to be my beer to drink tonight.
Oh, must have been my favorite from the last episode. So what are you drinking tonight?
So instead, since Oktoberfest season is winding down, aka it's over, I'm drinking Spindletap Festbier. Oh, nice. Which actually is the can art is a far cry from their usual stuff, but I really like it. It looks almost like a Bob Ross painting of the Alps, but then the sky is like that Bavarian Oktoberfest flag.
Yeah, it's a little cartoonish. I like it.
Yeah, it's very cool. What are you drinking?
So I guess, unbeknownst to us, we both picked Spindletap beer. So I'm drinking Heavy Hands because that's a staple in my fridge. I was drinking Lone Pint Yellow Rose, but I got to the end of my stash of it. And I got to give a shout out to Adam since he's not here today. He, graciously dropped off a lot of his beers when he moved to Austin and said, "Hey, I don't want to travel with it. I'm going to be this benevolent friend of yours and give you these beers." Well, turns out that motherfucker gave me some old ass beer. So I had to drain pour a Lone Pint because the Yellow Rose tasted flat. It had to have been over a year old. So thanks a lot, Adam. I was really excited for that beer too.
So you say it had to be over a year old. Did you check the date on the bottom of the can?
This one was like a smudge date, so I couldn't tell the year on it. So having two back-to-back, one fresh and one not fresh, wasn't a good experience for me. But Heavy Hands coming in the clutch here.
So it's interesting that you say that you had beers before this. Do you want to introduce what we're talking about today?
I would love to. So today we are going to talk about, since last week was such a hit, right? Where we were talking about things we were passionate and not passionate about. We're going to go on that theme again for a second episode since it went so well last time. And we're going to talk about our best and worst beer experiences. Between the two of us, we've drank a lot of beer in our lifetime. So I think we need to take full body of work on the things that stick out to us on the best and worst times with this thing we love called beer. Crazy little thing called beer.
Yeah, don't cut that out. Leave that in.
Soundbite. Oh man, before we talk about this beers though, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm blinking at a rate of 40 blinks per second. I almost came in today with an eye patch. So I know I've told you this story before, but the listeners have not heard about my eye trauma experiences. So I kind of feel like I need to fill them in since I've since re-injured my eye. And earlier today, I felt like somebody was poking ice picks into my eye. So I'm blinking and watering it at a very alarming rate tonight.
I need to be filled back in here on what happened to flare this injury up.
All right. So listeners, the things you deal with when you live that suburban dad life is you have household injuries. And so I get up pretty early for work. So a couple months back, it was like 5:30, 6 in the morning. I was going for a box of cereal because I'm in the suburbs. I shop at Costco, right? So our pantry is not big enough to store the shit we buy from Costco. So we have what's called the Costco closet, which is our overflow pantry. And so I went for a box of cereal in there, but I chose not to turn on the lights that morning. So it was pitch dark, and it was a cereal box that had the flap open. And I didn't realize that when I grabbed it in the pitch dark. In the corner of a cereal box, like borderline impaled my right eye, and it hurt like a son of a bitch. So fast forward like 2 months later, I'm like asleep in the middle of the night, and then I get up and I open my eye, and it feels like I just ripped my cornea back open again. So what I thought was a healing eye turns out is a re-injured eye. So I went back in and I got a contact eye patch that I'm wearing today, and we're just gonna let this episode ride. So
you don't know what re-aggravated it? You just woke up and it was worse?
Yeah. So
Dang.
the doctor said like it must have been like a more severe injury than he thought the first time. So that it, like when he told me that it was good, it was just like surface level good. And so it was like the layer underneath was maybe torn a little bit. And so it never like fully attached all the way. And so sometimes at night when your eyes are like moving around a lot, it can like re-injure. So yeah.
Here, I was flattered. I thought you were just winking at me a lot.
It's because I love you, Ryan. Fun fact on the Costco closet, it's also the same closet that Adam and I used to brew beer in our homebrew episode that we did a year ago.
You might need to clear out some room to hold all your hot takes.
That needs to be like a basement where I can like force them down so they can never come back up again.
A dungeon where you can lock them up in the dark. Wait to unpack those with your psychiatrist in like 30 years.
All right, so let's get back to beer here. I got to do something to distract me from my weird eye over here, lazy eye. So I think we need to start us out, Ryan. Like, since you were Mr. Negativity last week, what are some of the things that like just stand out to you, that beer memory that was also one of the most awesome experiences that you can think of?
My immediate reaction goes to my one and only experience at the Great American Beer Festival.
Ooh.
In Denver. That was the peak of my beer existence. And that was like early on. That was like 2 or 3 years into drinking craft beer. My buddy, friend of the show, Wes, he made him and his wife plan this trip, invited me, and I went. And yeah, I mean, like, talk about like mind blowing. Not just the festival itself, but all like the rare beer tastings and like beer events surrounding it the entire weekend. It's like you wake up in the morning, and by the time you finish your coffee, you're like out the door, headed to your first event, and it's just jam-packed all weekend. It was incredible.
So I looked at some videos from the people going to the festival this year, and there was a lot of silent disco going on. Did you have that going on back when you were there?
Either that wasn't a thing yet, or we didn't associate with those circles. Either way, I'm okay with it.
I had never done that before, and like the Flying Saucer in Sugarland does like a beer. It's called Beer Feast, I think, every year. And Meredith and I went, and they had the silent disco, and I was like, "Oh, this is bullshit. I'm not going to do this." And then she's like, "You got to do this," and she like put the headphones on, and it like immediately was Notorious B.I.G. And I was like, "Oh shit, it's on." So yeah, I had a time.
Get you for sure.
So that was probably one of my favorite beer memories. Like me and Meredith, 90s rap, drinking great craft beer at the Flying Saucer. That was actually a ton of fun. Like perfect sunshine, not too hot. Good times.
I feel like, yeah, like any event, if it's outdoors in like the perfect weather, it just like multiplies the enjoyability of that experience for sure.
Yeah. So I want to take us back like, since I think we got to start from our roots here. So I think we need to like talk about some of our first experiences with beer. And I'm just going to throw one out there that is both a best and a worst beer experience of my life. And that is the tradition that I had in college of buying a 30 pack of Keystone Light and splitting it 3 ways and playing Halo. So best because that was the tradition. It was fun. We made this massive pile of Keystone Light in our dorm rooms that we later made into pyramids and other things. But also the worst because it was Keystone Light. And after splitting the 30 pack, it was usually not a great day the next day. So what are some of your early memories of drinking?
So I have some thoughts kind of related to that, but I want to ask you a question first. So like, was alcohol allowed in your dorm rooms, or did you like sneak it in?
Oh, it was snuck in for sure.
Okay, I was gonna say, I was like, you seem so nonchalant about making beer pyramids and stuff. And I was like, that's
actually, I will retract that statement. You could not do that in a dorm room. The beer pyramid actually came when we rented an apartment across the street from campus. So that's when we really had the beer. We weren't that bold in a dorm room to have. I mean, we had like hundreds of cans. Like it looked like Oscar the Grouch just like dumped his shit over in the corner. And then eventually we're like, hey man, maybe we should make that into a pyramid. So.
Did you ever have friends like fill like liquor bottles with like water and throw like markers in them and then like light them up with like black lights or whatever?
Yes, you mean like to give like ambiance for the dorm room? Yes. I thought that was so cool.
I did too. Looking back on it, it's like the most tacky thing in the world.
Yeah, you had those lights, and then you had like I had like an inflatable Corona bottle that I had hanging from the ceiling. I was like, yeah, it's so cool. And then when I realized how lame it was, actually our brother-in-law Will, I think I gave it to him after I was done. I was like, the torch has been passed.
Yeah, the one beer experience in college that stands out to me was like there was always a dad's day at Oklahoma State for our fraternity. And so that weekend every year we'd always buy a keg of it actually was Southern Star Bombshell Blonde. So we were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get fancy beer for this one, and we'd get that. And I got to be honest, I hated it. I could not drink it.
That's your Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, it was like at the time it was like too like biscuity, like bready, like yeasty. I couldn't handle it, man. It was awful. And it's like tainted me ever since. Like now I can, like if I just don't think about it and I drink it, it's like, yeah, of course. This is like there's a reason why this is kind of like a classic of Houston craft beer. But at the time I wasn't ready for it. And so it's same thing. Like I said last episode, I have these mental blocks, and that's one of them is remembering how much I hated it in college, and it taints my experience with it today.
Show me where the beer touched you. So since we're on like the college kick here, like I think this is going to be a tangent for our episode, but I feel like most of my worst beer experiences are over consuming beer, right? I mean, that's usually when bad things happen, right? So one of those in particular that I've been fighting with ever since I've been in college is like I was at a party, I was at a kegger, hammering a bunch of beers, looking around like people at the party were partaking in other illegal drugs. I was not doing that, but police showed up and I was on scholarship. And I was like, I don't want to lose my scholarship. So in the logical mind that I was in, I jumped the back fence, but there was a hill behind there, and I landed super jacked up on my ankle, and I rolled it so hard that I've had ankle problems ever since that day. And when I was in college, and after I'd talked to my parents and like told them I was on crutches, I told them that it was a flag football injury. That one I've been paying for ever since. So Do you have any like notable beer injuries?
Well, no, you jarred a memory loose in my head of being at like a college party, and it was like a condo. It was like a 2-floor apartment or whatever. Yeah, and the cops showed up, and one of our friends like jumped out the second floor window down to the ground. And there was like a cop there looking in the window on the first floor, and he just like smacked down on the ground just right next to this cop, and he was like, seriously?
I'm a golden god.
It's just like so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the only one I can think of is living up in Minnesota. They have obviously all the lakes, so the partying on the lake was like the big deal, and tying up boats and doing that whole business. I do remember going up there for 4th of July one year, and after being out there for all day, like your coordination gets lost a little bit. So I went to go jump in the water and didn't jump that far off the boat, and came down and caught my leg on a propeller and like gashed up the side of my leg. That was
ouch.
Yeah, that sucks.
Speaking of jarring loose memories, this isn't my memory, but my brother-in-law on the other side of the family, on his bachelor party, they were having a good time, and they had rented a boat on a lake, and they were doing flips and dives off the side of the boat. And he did not jump far enough off the boat, and he definitely cracked some freaking ribs on his bachelor party. So beer injuries are a real thing, man. You know how
it sucks. Yeah. It sucks that drinking beer on the water is so much fun, because it is like by far the most dangerous way to do it.
I'm surprised, like when you drive like down I-10 on the highway and you see all those like those billboards, it's like, have you been in an 18-wheeler accident? Call Jim Adler, the Texas Hammer. I'm surprised there aren't billboards out there that are like, have you been injured by the beer that you're drinking? Call the Texas Hammer. So I'm going to take us like on another theme path here with like best and worst beer experiences. So I think this would be something interesting for the podcast. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but do you have any experiences that like really stick out as like what made you fall in love with craft beer? Because I got one I can share.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've talked about my redneck palate at length. So like some of the things that stick out to me that really made me love beer, I've mentioned it on the show before, and I'm not going to speak too much on it because I think it's going to become an episode because I'm really close to my plate. But the Flying Saucer introduced me to craft beer, and specifically to Belgian beers, doubles and triples. I fell in love with those beers, and I was like, wow, this really takes beer to another level. But the other memory I have around falling in love with craft beer, we were living in California, the Bay Area, and it was my first experience going to gas stations where they sold you the big bottle singles. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I can buy all these like fancy looking beers with cool can art. And I would take them home, and like my parents would come visit, and I'd like pull out a bunch of beer tasters, and I'd do our own tasting at the house. And I thought I was like, so fancy. And like, I don't know why, but there's like one beer that I remember that I was like, just thought that I was at that moment where I was starting to fall in love. It was, I actually remember it was Ninkasi was the brewery, and it was a beer called Tricerahops, and it was a triple IPA. And I just remember like passing that out, like thinking that I was drinking some of the finest stuff in the world. So that was when I was really starting to get into the hoppy beer game. So I don't know. I remember those days very fondly.
Yeah, I remember Tricerahops. So yeah, not to piggyback off you too much, but yeah, I think Flying Saucer was very pivotable.
That's a great word.
Flying Saucer was like very pivotable. I said it again. Holy shit.
Yes. I'm not cutting any of this.
God damn it. Flying Saucer was very pivotal in forcing me to expand my beer palate. Yeah, because when you're trying to get, for anybody that doesn't know, to get your plate at Flying Saucer, you have a card and you scan it at a machine when you go in there, and it shows you a whole bunch of beers that you haven't tried, and you have to try 200 different beers that you have not tried to get your plate. And so when I started getting into craft beer, it was like immediately pushed into like the hoppy, pale ale, started going into IPAs, and I couldn't get enough of the hoppy beers. And at the time I was splitting Rockets tickets, season tickets with a friend of the show, Wes. And so Flying Saucer was the place we went before every single game. And so you'd show up and you could drink 3 beers per visit, and you run out of hoppy beers very quick. And so if you want to keep working towards your plate, it forces you to try other stuff, right? So that was what started forcing me to be like, okay, this is like as close as I can get. And so it starts pushing you out farther and farther and farther. And that really does wonders for expanding your palate and like what you are willing to try.
Nice. So do you have any really bad experiences out there, Ryan? Other than getting served a Ghost in the Machine in a frosty mug this last week.
Yeah, that was pretty upsetting. My wife and I were on our way to a doctor's appointment. And so we decided on our way down to the med center, we would have lunch at a place downtown that recently made the Houston Chronicle top 100 restaurants in Houston list. And it was like basically a bar / restaurant. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a beer. They had Ghost in the Machine. Hell yeah. So I ordered that. And yeah, they bring it in a frosted mug. I couldn't contain myself. And Allison's like, what? I was like, I guess you just wouldn't understand.
So I'm going to first try to predict what you did. My prediction is you sat there stewing about it, bitching about it, but did not say a damn thing, and you just drank it.
That's exactly right.
When I posted that picture on Instagram today, I was hoping that I could do a multiple choice on what would you do if you were served it in a frosty mug, and like one of them would be like burn the establishment down. 2 would be politely educate the server that they should never be serving that in a frosty mug, or 3, bitch about it on social media and do not a damn thing about it. And I knew that was your choice all along.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So like not really craft beer related, but like I have some like really like favorite beer memories of my lifetime that like stand out. And last week we were doing hot takes and we were talking about combining beer with experiences. And so I have a couple of those experiences that just like stand out in my mind where I was like, that was a happy time. And like we mentioned it last episode around like vacation beers always stand out. Like I haven't traveled to a lot of countries. I mean, I'm not a world traveler over here. So like when I go somewhere, it's like a big deal, right? So when I was in college, I studied abroad in Italy. And I was very far removed from craft beer, but at the time we were buying these like giant liter beers. I mean, they had a lot of Heineken over there, but I remember Birra Moretti. I drank a ton of those and I was like, this is fancy. I'm drinking this Italian beer. It's like in bulk, you're buying it like a 40 over there. I remember that fondly. And then I don't know why, I just remember these beers from the country. And like Meredith and I, when we had our honeymoon in Belize, they had this beer called Belican, and I'm sure if I like pulled it out of a lineup here, it would probably taste pretty terrible. But like I hammered so many of those Belicans on the honeymoon that I was like, it was the beer. Like I was always carrying one the entire time, and I was like, I still probably think of that as like one of the best beers I've ever had. But it's just because it was a honeymoon beer,
My dad loves Belican beer.
Oh yeah? Yeah. I didn't know anyone else has ever had Belican.
Yes. I couldn't believe you just said that.
I still remember it. It's like, oh, I love that beer. This is the greatest. I can't get it in the U.S. Blah, blah, blah.
That's great. And you actually, talking about Italy and drinking beer in Italy, you jarred a memory, not even a memory. You jarred something loose that I meant to bring up in our hot takes last episode.
Better late than never.
The drinks around the world at Epcot is a crock of shit and a ripoff. It's terrible.
Whoa, coming in hot.
Yes. like half the countries you go to don't actually have any beverages that are actually from that country. And then when you do go, you get like a shot glass of a cocktail and it's like $12.
So I've never done like is drinks around the world, is that like I just went and I tried to get a beer from every country, but is drinks around the world like a more like organized thing where you get like tasters?
I mean, Disney doesn't officially endorse this.
Yeah.
But just go on like Etsy or like Amazon or anything, and they sell like lanyards with like dry erase markers with like checklists for every country in Epcot, and you can like write in the drink and the rating of everything you had. Like they have full on like kits for this.
Nice. So when we went to Disney, like I just got on Untapped and I was trying to see what are the beers I could choose from there, because I was just looking at it. And I think where I was disappointed is I went around to multiple countries and the beers that Untapped said were there, they were often not there. And so like I went and like some countries, like you said, they didn't have anything, but some did. And so, I mean, that part was fun, but I mean, frankly, my favorite beers were the American beers I found, because like some of the stuff from other countries was a little disappointing. I could go to Total Wine and get some friggin' bomb ass international beers, and Disney just didn't have it going on.
Yeah. I just think to remember, like, I think Canada was one of the first places you go into when you enter the park.
Mm-hmm.
And their like signature drink was like, I don't remember. It was like whiskey and Coke with like a drizzle of maple syrup or something. It wasn't that like stupid, but it was like, it wasn't that far off. It was something like that. I was like, immediately was like, really? Is this what we're doing now?
What a bit of maple syrup, eh?
Yeah. Whatever it was, it felt very gimmicky and like forced, and it just didn't really get better for me from there. And I'm taking a turn back into -10, so I think we need to change subjects here.
All right, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to say that I don't know why I went from a hazy IPA to a coffee stout, but the weather got a little colder and I needed a little pick me up, try to counteract my eye going crazy over here. So I'm drinking the Black Matter coffee stout by Manhattan Project Beer Company in Dallas, Texas. Super roasty.
So I seem to remember that one being very good. I've been to that brewery up in Dallas.
God. Roasty coffee beers, man. Oh, I'm so glad that the nights have gotten cooler in Houston. This is where it's at.
Yeah. Allison got home from the grocery store a couple weeks ago and had a little surprise. He brought some negative space, which is amazing.
Yes.
I haven't cracked into it yet. I should have the last couple of nights when it actually got cold. But yeah, I can't wait to crack into that when it's chilly outside. I'm hoping to have it outside on the back porch in like, hoodie with the hood up, like maybe a blanket over me.
Yeah, we're
really just live in the cold.
We're getting into those like few months in Houston where you're like, oh yeah, we need to invest in our backyard because this is good life. Even though like 90% of the year you're like, I'm not going outside. What the fuck are you talking about? So, hey, we should really invest in a fire pit.
Yeah. We need this outdoor patio because we can use it like 20 days a year. It's so worth it.
Nice.
So we've been talking about some like highs and lows with beer drinking, and I'm going to be honest, and we've kind of talked about this before, is we always, have a beer or two before we start recording, right? Our little pregame. And then we have our beer while we're recording. So that kind of makes me wonder about this idea of kind of like, people talk about it like a bell curve, almost like your peak when you're trying to do something. You have a couple beers and then like you kind of relax, you get in the groove. I guess what I'm trying to say is we got to talk about kind of a peak drunkenness.
Ooh, I like that.
Do you think this is a thing, or do you think we're just like making this up?
Oh, there's absolutely an ideal level of buzz. And when you go way past that curve, that's when you have your worst beer experiences. So it's a balance. You want to, like, going from best beer experience to worst beer experience is like sometimes just a beer away.
So I feel like mine's very early. I'm naturally an introvert, and so I feel like my perfect buzz, which I blow by way too fast, is when I don't realize that I'm actually feeling anything yet, but I actually open up more and I'm like way more relaxed and willing to talk about whatever. And but like I say, I blow past that because like I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, I'm fine, whatever, and I keep having a couple more, and so I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm starting to feel it. By that point, that ship has already sailed.
Yeah, 2 beers is good. 4 beers even better, right?
I guess here's another question. Do you? Everyone says, yeah, like like playing like drinking games and stuff. Everyone's like, oh yeah, like I get a lot better and then I start to get worse. Like, do you think that's like you think you're getting better until you start getting worse, or do you think that it actually does, like you relax and actually get better?
I believe in it 100%. Like, they talk about sports and they talk about like how much of performance is mental. I think when you play these games and you overthink it when you're not drinking, and then you take your brain out of the equation a little bit, and then you're in that zone. But then you get to a point when it starts affecting motor skills. That's when shit starts going downhill. So
100%. I'm such a head case in any competitive game that, yeah, I need to take the edge off a little bit. So I stop like over analyzing every little thing. I'm like, I'm smart. I can like, like if I let it go here, but if I like twist my wrist, it might, the ping pong ball might spin and it'll curve off. So I got to make sure I keep it stiff. So it's like, I need one or two to like just chill the fuck out.
Just to turn your brain off. Like, I feel like the pub game that like I think of immediately when I think of the bell curve is darts. I feel like darts, it's like I get in the zone and I'm better after like 2 beers, but then like after that it's like, yeah, I'm starting to really miss the board.
Yeah, I used to think I was pretty good at darts, and then yeah, I realized my bell curve falls off very steep for darts, probably faster than any other pub game. So we've talked about darts, and I've heavily implied beer pong with a couple of our coordination discussions. But what about like different sporting events? Do you think there's like a peak level of buzz for different sports?
I'm going to need some clarification on that question.
So I feel like, I mean, the most obvious one is football, with people just like tailgating like crazy before games. Like basically,
yeah, like there's not a lot of moderation going on in that situation.
There's no moderation. You can go into the game and like you can like pretty much follow exactly what's going on. I feel like probably most sports are kind of like that, but I know like baseball, it's like a little bit harder to follow the ball.
Yeah. I feel like my baseball experiences when I talk about perfect buzz is like you're usually pre-gaming before it. I show up around the second inning, and then I pay attention to like maybe 10% of the game after that. That's my experience with baseball. So I'm not like a huge like need to see every play in baseball. I'm there for the social event. So my buzz can go a little further in baseball, and I'm okay with it. So I think we need to like discuss like the strategy of when you say like what is the ideal buzz. Like I think the strategy has changed now that college football stadiums start selling beer, because there was a time there where college stadiums would not sell beer, and there's still probably some that don't. But I just remember it was all about you got a little bit shit-faced before you went into the game because you knew you couldn't drink anything during it. But then there was always that period when you get to like the third quarter and you're like, it's all worn off and you just feel kind of sluggish and you want to take a nap. So like now that the stadiums sell beer, it's kind of like, no. Let's get to that peak level again and then just maintain. So I think strategies have changed a lot now that beer is in college football stadiums. What do you think?
I think you nailed it. So yeah, football is very drawn out. There's a lot of downtime. So once you start And you're exactly right with the whole pregame, and then it starts tapering off during the game. So like all this downtime, TV timeouts, halftime, like all this stuff. Yes, you start crashing and get really tired. Baseball, it's so drawn out, and like even if you pregame a little bit, it's not like the aggressiveness of like tailgating at a football game. So you can kind of maintain throughout the entire game, and you never like, go over the edge because, you're there for 3 hours and you drink like, say 3 or 4 beers, like you're kind of just maintaining. Basketball is really hard because it's like probably the least amount of downtime of all those sports that I've just mentioned. So it's the hardest to, go over the edge just because you don't have time to like keep getting drinks and stuff. Like there's just too much happening.
And bathroom breaks. You got to remember, it's the time you're spending in the line, and then it's the time you spend in the other line.
Yeah. So we talked about obviously buzz for pub games, drinking games, buzz for sporting events. Let's dip our toes into a little more controversial territory. What's your thoughts on drinking at like kids' birthday parties?
Highly support it.
I feel like first birthday parties especially is like straight up just an excuse for like parents to like let loose for a night.
I 100% agree. What was funny about that first birthday party was every single one of our friend group was not at parent age. We were the first trailblazer. And so we got a pony keg of Pacifico, and it became a kegger. And it basically was, my father-in-law, mother-in-law were watching our youngest daughter, and we were hammering beers with all these people that had no intention of having a kid. My best friend while I was out there just had his first kid. That just tells you how far different like California is versus the South on having kids. That was 9 years ago when we were at that party, and he just now had his first kid.
Good for him, man.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to think. Obviously, like, yeah, first birthday, like straight like blowout party, and not for the kids, for the parents. And then I feel like it kind of transfers more and more. Like the last few weeks, I've been to several like third and fourth birthday parties, and they're like in the morning at like, like play facilities, like indoor playgrounds and stuff. And there's like no alcohol there. So I feel like as they get past that toddler stage, it turns more into about the kids.
As it probably should, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's fair. Now we've talked about kids' birthdays. Move on to the next one. Exercise. If you've been drinking, have you ever had the urge to like exercise or do anything like physically exerting?
I think the answer like 90% of the time is hell no. But there's been times when day drinking where you had like a beer or 2 beers, and then you came home and it was like nobody else was drinking, and you just felt like you had all this energy that you just didn't know what to do with. I've gone on some like buzz runs before, and they're kind of fun. Like you just kind of go off and run. You're like, I got this energy, I'm going. And then you just take off. So I have done that before. It's been very rare, but not a bad experience. How about you?
Yeah, I have 2 that come to mind. One is playing tennis in college after drinking for a while was fun to me. I don't know why. But yeah, that stands out. The other thing, so we got my daughter a trampoline, like a big trampoline, like a 15-foot trampoline. I don't know, 2 months ago, and she's used it like twice. But I'll hang out on the back porch and watch like Sunday Night Football and like Monday Night Football, and like during like halftime, I'll like glance over at it a couple times, and I'll be like, all right, I'm just gonna jump on it for a second, and I'll go out there and I'll jump on it.
So I got a questions now. So you're known to have some lower back issues, right? I mean, I've seen you with like the little mat and shit, the like, roll your back problems out. So I've always felt like jumping on a trampoline the next day, you're like, why am I sore everywhere? Do you have that same experience with trampolines?
Oh, yeah, it's a whole body workout. Yeah,
yes.
My whole body is stiff.
In fact, it's not just me.
Yeah, and especially because I'm like, oh man, back in the day, I used to be able to do all these flips and stuff, and so like I try to do like flips and everything, and I'm getting better. But
yeah, I did a flip with the girls the other day too, and then like the second flip I tried, I landed like boom right on that trampoline. I was like, oh shit, that's gonna hurt tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I was watching college football on like a Saturday night, and I went and did it. And then I went and played golf with my neighbor on Sunday morning, like early, like 7 a.m. tee time. And I was so stiff that I played like probably the worst round of golf I've played in like 3 or 4 years, like easily, because I could not just pivot and swing. It was terrible. Dad problems over here.
Tennis, it's funny you mentioned tennis is that I remember growing up, like I played tennis, my parents played tennis, and they used to do these like adult tennis tournaments that they would like, I don't know if they were fundraisers or just like social events that they do. And instead of having like water or Gatorade in those giant like igloo coolers at, at the net, they'd fill those motherfuckers with beer, and you would be like playing, drinking beer and playing tennis. And I was like, I was always like, as a kid, I was like, what's that all about? But I think you may have been onto something in college there.
It's a fine line because, it's like if you do like a beer league, like softball league, you like try to chug a beer before you go up to bat and you try to run the bases and it's like you want to die. So like it can't be like at the same time. You have to like you said, like day drinking for a while and then go do the activity. You can't kind of do them at the same time.
I do have lots of memories, and I go back to like college, or not really college, but just pre-kids. I'll just call it pre-kids, where like it's at the end of the night and you're waiting on like a cab or an Uber or something, and you just felt like you had this like burst of energy and you just like take off running for like no reason. That's like, you could only do sprints when you've had some beer to drink. You're not doing the long distance shit.
Sprinting like in the dark after you've been drinking for a while, like is incredibly liberating and like free feeling. It's amazing. Yes.
Especially if you're going downhill and you feel like you're flying. You're like, the world is mine.
It feels a little dangerous.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it. Especially when you have a gimp ass ankle like mine.
What a ridiculous episode, Drew. I just gotta say it.
Yes. This is our kind of episode. This is something Adam would have appreciated if he were here.
I think so.
I just thought of a good beer memory.
Let's hear it.
All right. Before we close out, I got one more great beer memory, and it's one that you should appreciate because it's from the greatest college of all time, Texas A&M University. There's a tradition of taking, you get an Aggie ring and you dunk it in a pitcher and you have to down the whole pitcher. So back in the day, in the good old days, the Northgate area, which is the bar area of College Station, you could just drink freely out there. You could bring your own 30-pack of Keystone out there if you wanted to. Now you can't do that. But at the time, I remember it was like October, November, cold as shit, drinking that super carbonated Miller Lite pitcher. Beer could not taste better than when you're proving how fast you can drink a pitcher of beer. So Oklahoma State, eat your heart out. You got no beer traditions even close to what College Station's got. So Ryan, suck on that.
I feel like we may need to do an episode about this.
Maybe the best beer college traditions. Hint, hint.
I think we're onto something.
Well, all right, Ryan. This has been quite a fun way to spend our Friday evening, going down memory lane on some of our early beer memories. But as usual on this podcast, we also brought the pain. Specifically,
some painful, literally painful experiences. Would you like to close us out?
Well, we dove into Drew's Costco pantry of hot takes and memories. So we highly recommend you guys do the same. But if you do, just make sure you don't hit your eye on the way out. What do you think, Drew?
You'll poke your eye out, kid. This has been a Beering Ain't Easy production out of Houston, Texas. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook or at our website at crossthestreamsmedia.com, where you can find our podcast and all the other great sister podcasts on our network.
This has been a Cross the Streams Media Podcast.